basically, the way the history works was all these people, not all of them, but really, especially these what we call second generation Agile, right? Which was starting in the 1990s. All of these different lightweight methodologies came together in 2001 and wrote what's called the Agile Manifesto. Okay, so David, Peter, you guys said you haven't seen the manifesto before. You guys seen it before? No? Okay. All right. You've seen it? Can you see?
I thought you were just going to move that.
I was going to say, can you even see? All right. So here's the Agile Manifesto. The Agile Manifesto says the following. We are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value what? Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. That is, while there's value to the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. So, if you're reading this for the first time, what's your impression? Do you like it, hate it, love it? Worried about it?
My initial impression is I like it, but that's how the world works.
I like it, but that's how the world works. Yes. Yeah. What else?
Two lines that struck me straight away was the first line.
Individuals and interactions over processes.
That really hit home for me as soon as I saw that. And responding to change over following a plan. That's probably because I'm not very project management minded.
Okay.
Whereas that last one probably is the one that...
Which one?
Yeah, responding to change over following a plan, although I think, I'm sure it's a one-liner, the context around you still have to manage change, and I don't mean change control boards, but not following a plan is often, or agile in my experience with people, is often used as a reason for not having a plan at all. Mm-hmm. And even with an agile there's a plan,
yep.
Which is we're going to go about it in this way. And uncontrolled and rampant change is runaway projects.
Yeah.
But you've got to look at these things in the broader context.
David, what are your thoughts?
I go all the way back to your, excuse my Chinese not being really up.
Shuhari.
Shuhari, first chart. And I think sometimes the balance, people lose sight of the balance. And another chart of yours too about change. You drop people in uncontrolled change and they don't cope. And so they do need frameworks which perhaps disappear over time in order that they can be effective and focus on the things which really do count.
Yep. So and Siva, you've seen this before. Okay, that's what I thought. Colin, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it is something I've seen many times before, but we're not talking chaos. There are still defined things that are valuable.
Yep.
It's about.
But it looks like chaos.
It does, but it's not.
And this is the first reaction a lot of people look at it either. So it's interesting because if you want chaos, right? If you've been the quote-unquote developers in shackles and in the shackles of process, you're like, freedom! Right? You look at this and you say, yay! No more process, no more documentation, no more contracts, no more plans. This is life, right? And if you're on the other side, you look at this and you say, uh-oh, what are they saying exactly here, right? How much chaos is this going to cause, okay? And so really, we want to dive into this a little more and understand really the underlying concepts behind this. So, first thing, I want you to read this from an Agile mindset perspective, okay? Which is, what are these people trying to say when we talk about this from a learning and discovery perspective? What they're basically trying to say is this. Because this is knowledge work, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. And because of there's uncertainty, you really want to learn and discover instead of sort of plan and fix things up front. And here's an efficient way to learn and discover when it comes to software. Learn from individuals and in the interactions between them more than you're going to learn from processes and tools. You're going to learn a lot more from working software than you're going to learn from comprehensive documentation. You're going to learn tons more by collaborating with your customer than you're going to learn by negotiating a contract. And you're going to learn tons more from responding to change than just trying to follow a plan. So when you read it in that context about learning and discovery, first of all, it becomes less confrontational. It's not, screw this, we're picking this. It's a statement of where are you going to learn and discover and manage your uncertainty from? Okay? Yeah.
No, for me that's a key question.
Which one?
That one you just said is where are you going to learn and discover from?
This side or that side? Right? I mean, that's the answer. I'm going to learn from these things, overlearn from these things. Did I confuse you or?
No.
Okay. All right.
This
So-
also reflects the organisational change that you want to see happen. This the side reflects current state,
Yes?
probably. This side reflects what you hope will be the future state, and that's part of that agile mindset.
Well, yes, and so when we read this, we can read this in a couple of different ways, right? The way I'm trying to read this is to say, listen, what they're saying and what we're saying is not abandon these.
Bottom line.
Yeah, we're not saying abandon these. We're saying be conscious of how or what's going to provide you with more learning and discovery in your organization of knowledge work. Right? What's more important for you? Because I'll tell you this, if you're in a factory, you probably care about these things more than these things. If I'm in a factory, processes and tools are more important than individuals and interactions. Because I can take any individual off the assembly line, bring someone in, retrain them, and we're done. Right? Documenting procedures and standing operating procedures and processes and all that kind of stuff, those documentation and specs are more important to me than the end product, because without them I can't build the end product. But the opposite is here. Here, the end product, the working software, is going to provide you with learning and discovery that's going to change whatever you've documented. Remember, it's the nature of knowledge work, right? Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. We negotiate contracts which is scope, right, all the time. This is in, this is out, this is too big, this is too small. Well, wait a minute. Whatever you're going to negotiate up front is going to change. But establish a collaborative environment with your customer. So really when we look at these, the question is, where are you going to learn and discover from? It's from these things, not from these things. You may still want to use these things, and you probably still do, right? So we have processes and tools. But they're there for a function that is different than learning and discovery. We have documentation. But it's not for learning and discovery. It's for preserving, not conveying information. Right? We use documentation to convey information. As if we're trying to learn from each other. What do you want? What do I want? No. We're going to learn through the working software. Is this what you want? No. Let's give it feedback, right? Expect and adapt. But the documentation will have its own purpose. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation, we're going to use contracts. And part of our contracts are social contracts around how to collaborate. Right? Imagine if the contract is negotiating, how often are you as a customer going to give me feedback? Because listen, whatever we agree on up front is going to change. And that's okay. The key point is, that's okay. And responding to change over following, we're going to create plans. Right? That's totally fine. But the more important thing is to inspect and adapt. Because this is exactly like trying to create a plan to get from home to work, and then as soon as you go down, there's an accident. Okay? Are you going to stick to your plan just because you created, or are you going to respond to the change? And are you going to beat yourself? I should have planned better next time. how could you know that there will be an accident? Is this clear?
Mm.
The other thing I want to mention is the word over. Right? The word over is a very powerful word because it didn't say instead of. But by the way, many people read it instead of. And there's nothing I can do to help them. Because it's not instead of. It's just over. And over makes it ambiguous and uncertain, which we don't like. Right? Over how much over? To what degree? Like, is it 51-49% or is it 60-40? Right? It's a spectrum, guys. I don't know how much it's over. But you have to understand, because we're in knowledge work, these are the elements of learning and discovery. Does that make sense? And this one, I just want to emphasize for a minute. The word comprehensive documentation is actually quite important, because here's the thing. When organizations and teams are faced with uncertainty, okay, you see this interesting behavior of trying to learn by documenting more, right? Let's add more use cases. Let's add more, diagrams. Let's add more UML. Let's add more, in hope of understanding what it is we were trying to build. Instead of actually trying to build a thin slice of it and say, yeah, no, what do you think? So that's what this one is after. Does that make sense? Because this one is the most one. I mean, we talked about the myth around documentation. Because this is the only place where the word documentation shows up in the Agile Manifesto. This is it. And I can't read this as do not document. Now, when they wrote this, they also wrote the 12 principles. So the 12 principles provide a little more detail around, again, how to learn and discover. So let's go over these together, okay? Number one, our highest priority is to satisfy the customer. Now, they didn't stop the sentence there. Because if they did, yeah, duh, great, no problem. But they said, through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. So how are we satisfying the customer specifically? Through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Not just early. If they only stopped at the word early, we'd all have been screwed. Why? Because now a 6-month project I need to deliver in 2 months. So it's early. No, but it's early and continuous. Which means what? This is all about what? Thin slicing. Finding that value slice, delivering it, yeah, okay, more. And that's how you're going to satisfy your customer. Not by creating upfront documents or requirements or. Early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Cool? Yes? You guys there? You're not there?
I'm trying to unpack the word valuable.
Valuable. To who?
Yes, exactly.
To the customer.
And
Whatever they
also-
deem as valuable.
Yes, okay.
Right? I mean, that's the key. It's not our judgment of valuable. It's what they
Customers.
deem of valuable, yeah?
Yes.
Number
And
two
so
is my
therefore,
favorite.
workable software is not necessarily valuable.
No, and they didn't say workable.
And that's what I'm trying to get
Yeah.
at. I'm trying to make sure I get my head around it.
Number two, they said, welcome changing requirements. Oh, this is my favorite. Welcome changing requirements even late in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. Let's pause. This one needs some deciphering. What do you mean we're going to welcome change in requirements even late? Well, here's the first thing to understand about this principle. We welcome change, and change is not for free. No one said change is for free in this sentence. They said welcome change. Because today, change is not for free and we still don't welcome it. Right? There's an attitude. And the reason why we should welcome change is learning and discovery. Change in requirements mean we've learned and discovered something new. And this is honestly one of my litmus tests for teams. Right? If I walk into a team and they get change from their customer and they're like, yes, change, versus, oh, change. Right? If they hate the change they're getting, then their mindset is, I was trying to finish this, and now you're giving me new scope. Scope creep, right? We hear that all the time. versus understanding that the customer is out there discovering. Using my deliverables or not, they're out there discovering, and good for them. And there's nothing called scope creep. Scope creep assumes that the scope was known. Right? In knowledge work, the scope isn't. Because there's this icky-wissy. I'll know it when I see it. Right? Now, going back here. So what do you mean? No scope creep? We welcome? Yeah. But change isn't for free. So how do we know what to change and what not to change? Well, Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. So we need to understand why we're changing. Not we as IT and business, but everyone really, right? The business especially needs to understand, is this change, right, worth the cost? Remember we said so? We said the key in knowledge work is to understand, is the value of the change greater or less than the cost of the change? We welcome the change, and there's a price for the change, and the business needs to think about, is the change valuable enough or not? That's what this sentence means. Deliver working software frequently, from a couple of weeks to a couple of months with a preference to the shorter timescales. What do you guys think that's about?
Cycling, learning and...
Learning and discovery. If any question I ask, if you say learning and discovery, you're probably right. That's sort of the default. And yeah, just write that down. Learning and discovery. Right? What is your name? Learning and discovery. Right? You'll probably be right. Yeah, this is all about learning and discovering quickly.
This is one I struggle with personally a little bit, because it's working software in the context of the stuff I'm doing. I can't see how I could deliver something, a working piece of software, even in a couple of months, because of the complexity and scale of what's being done. So am I being too literal when you roll out weeks to a couple of months?
No. So here's the aspect here that's important to understand. So when we say deliver working software, where are you delivering it to?
Well, when I hear it was deliver working software, delivered into productive use.
Good. So I would caveat that and say, depends. Right? Because I've worked with systems where if I deploy to production, I got to train 20,000 people. Okay? So it becomes a little taxing if I have to train them every 2 weeks. So there's a judgment call here. Okay? But what they're looking for is deliver working software. You could deliver it to the customer to start playing with and learning and experimenting and then. Right? So deliver, I think there's a caveat there, is whether we release or not, that's a judgment call from the business. But we deliver so that people can learn. Make sense? Did that solve that issue?
Yeah.
Okay. Business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. What do you guys think about that one?
You have to have a reasonable degree of buy-in to get that level of collaboration.
I would say you need to have buy-in for a lot of these, so I totally agree with you, right? And this does require a great deal of buy-in from business people, okay? And from developers, actually, both ways. But the question is why? Why is this principle there?
Well, for me, the issue, I didn't quite entirely agree why number 3 is an issue for me.
So let's go back to 3? Sure.
It's about the quick. You said deliver quickly. Deliver working software frequently, and you use the word quickly in your explanation.
Yeah, that's
My
wrong.
concern there is that we need to give developers time to learn and develop
Yes.
as equally as the customer. And so coming back to 4, yes, they need to be daily so that they are both learning
Yes.
and developing,
Perfect.
discovering at the same time.
This is all about learning and discovery. And daily is actually a critical point here. All right? And the reason daily is critical is because when we look at business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project, daily becomes a cadence for them, right? And it's not every 2 days. Every 2 days becomes a slippery slope, right? But daily, even if we need to check in with each other daily and say, I didn't learn anything, nothing, great. The other thing I've noticed tremendously is this. As developers work, as technical people work, they have questions, right? Now, if they can't get a hold of someone who can answer their questions, what are they going to do? They're going to make assumptions. And they are beautiful at making assumptions, right? And even if they're really good developers and try to reach out to someone, but that someone isn't available, meetings all day, or whatever, right? Just going to assume. Especially if they're in the zone and working and all that kind of stuff. So having a daily cadence where I can check in, what you're really doing is minimizing the gap that could happen between them. Because if you truly understand that business people are in a constant state of discovery and learning, then they're constantly moving, right? Even a delta right there, right? They're moving away. So I need that development team to interact daily so that we can keep that in sync. Or else you're actually introducing a great deal of waste.
In larger organisations, where you're looking at significant changes to business processes and but the business people, the coalface who you would normally have co-located and working with the developers, they might not be able to foresee what the new world's going to look like. I mean, I have a picture in my mind that in those situations, that's where good BAs come into the picture, acting as the intermediaries.
And business people doesn't literally mean the business. It means BAs, from my point of view, would be business people. Build projects around motivated individuals and kill the rest. Did it say that? No? No? Okay. Give them the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job done. Interesting one. So what they're saying here is, and we watched the video, right? So build projects around motivated individuals, right? Now, how do I motivate them? Well, give them the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job done. This is the autonomy, mastery, and purpose we were talking about, right? Give them the environment and support they need. Autonomy. But autonomy with support, because I've seen people take this to an extreme and say, go finish this. But I trust you. You can do it, right? But boss, we don't have, listen, I trust you, right? It said trust? Yes, I trust you. You don't need me. You can do it by yourself. And the reality is, they're not supporting them, right? So give them the environment and support they need. And really, I find this is the hardest part. And trust them to get the job done. And this is where I believe, if people have problems with trust, then forget Agile, forget a lot of other things. We just have more fundamental issues to discuss and resolve at that point in time. If people cannot trust the people they're working with. And this is a true call for a different type of leadership as well, right? A leadership of servant leadership, right? Facilitative leadership, where you're not just telling people what to do. You're giving them space and they're trusting them to get the job done. Okay? The most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a team is face-to-face communication. So this is a principle. Strong principle. Now, what they're saying is this. They're saying it's the efficient and effective way of conveying information. And I would underline the word conveying. Not preserving, right? It's conveying. Now, does this mean that Agile cannot exist with remote teams? No. All it's saying is the most efficient and effective. It didn't say you have to always do the most efficient and effective. It's a statement. And I think it's hard for people, it's hard for me to argue, yeah, I believe the most efficient and effective is face-to-face, and I may not be able to do it all the time, and it's a conscious choice, and it's something that I understand that I'm not picking the most efficient and effective. And that's okay. Sometimes it may be okay. But the key is to understand when do you need the most efficient and effective way of conveying, and then invest in face-to-face. Go ahead.
Irrespective of remote teams, I'm not convinced. I mean, there's the research about about criminal witnesses getting completely wrong because they've superimposed some impression they may have had over the words that they received. I mean, I'm just not sure about that. I mean, I think it's right up there.
So what is the most efficient and effective?
Well, sometimes if you're getting something which is significantly different to where you've been, or you just have a zero understanding of a particular area, you need to have something replayed to you a number of times. Having it written down in front of you can actually be, in those situations, can be more efficient and more effective.
So the research I've read is that written communication conveys only 10 to 12% of what's trying to be communicated. And that's why when you read a story, that remaining 80, 90% is left to your imagination, right? I mean, that's why people love reading instead of, watching the movie. So if I take that point of reference for me, then even the best type of writing conveys 10 to 12 to 20% of what we're trying to convey. Okay?
I mean, I'm not picturing it as being the only form.
So, and there is where I think just language would make a difference, which is there's a difference between conveying and preserving, and I believe people need both. Okay? So I need to have a conversation with you, I need to understand, and then I may need a document to go and read afterwards. Right? But what happens today is we prepare the document, right? The BA creates this amazing document to start with, and it's a lot. So I'm not going to sit with Siva and explain every word here. And Siva, you can read English, so here. Read this, and genuinely, if you have any questions, call me. You know what? We're going to schedule a review in 2 weeks to go over it, right? To go over any questions you have. That's the reality of what's happening today. So now, suddenly, the conveying of all this information has happened through text. Right? Versus, and this is what we're saying actually, is to say, okay, if you're going to give this upon someone, well then read it or convey it with them, right? So here's what this means, here's what this means, here's what this means. And I've seen horror stories based on this. Because technical people look at this and say, okay, boss, which section am I working on? Which module? 22? Okay, and they just flip to the requirements they're working on, and that's it. They don't read context. They don't read the why. They don't read the relations. I've seen disasters happen because of the formatting that happened on the page where the most important requirements, right, were put in a paragraph form instead of a bullet form, and so people didn't read them. I've seen them, right? And it costs thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to fix. So where we're going with this is to say, wait, conveying information and preserving information are two different things. Human beings forget. You need to preserve information, right? It's not just enough to say, I told you so and we're done, and you didn't remember? Shame on you. No, human beings will forget, period. And human beings need a way to go back and say, okay, now I understand where this is. At the same time, my experience has been, if left to these documents to convey, it's actually a very, very poor method of conveying, especially with how multinational we are and where, like for example, English isn't my first language. The way I read and write and comprehend is different than a native speaker, period. Right? And where a comma and a full stop or a period may make a difference for me, may not make any difference for me. I just read through it. So honestly, I think it actually is quite dangerous to rely on written communication to convey information. But to preserve, sure, why not? So what we're saying is understand when it's important to convey, especially with complex material, right? You want to get that face-to-face because imagine doing an audio recording of this whole class, right? There's certain facial expression, intuition, there's just so much happening here, right? That I've seen people where one person is telling another person a requirement and their facial expression actually says so much more about what they want from it than the words coming out of their mouth.
I also wonder too if conveying of that information has to be within the context of the types of organisations you're dealing with. I think different organisations, such as if you're dealing with academic organisations, I think they'd probably really relish having everything managed in a very written format and style. But I did wonder about the fact that with a face-to-face, it's hard to gender trust, which is mentioned in the previous line.
It's hard to
engender trust when you're not in a face-to-face.
when you're not. Okay. Yes. So it builds a lot of trust as well.
Yes.
So the conversation also gives opportunity to discuss for clarification. Like immediately I do not know, I can ask you to get immediate feedback.
Now, let me tell you some experiences sort of on the opposite side for a few minutes where due to language, right, we could be talking face to face and I just don't get your accent. Easily, right? I just don't get it. I don't get what you're saying. And so I think at that point, yeah, text is important.
There's also a situation though where, I think the two go hand in hand. And time horizon, it depends what we're talking about when we say preserve. But I was envisaging a longer, post-project almost when you use the word preserve. But if you're conveying information, if I'm conveying information to you which you think is important, you're going to be writing down. You're going to miss some of it. So if I've already got the written stuff there for you, I can A, help you focus, and B, by not having to choose the stuff, and you can concentrate solely on me.
100%. And that's where I think it's important to combine both and understand that it's and I agree with the principle the way it's written, right? And I think there's context around it, which is understand that people need these multiple modal ways of communicating, right? Which is sometimes text, sometimes, but having the face-to-face experience, right, with these multimodal ways of communication, I think is the most efficient. And the most efficient actually is two people face-to-face at a whiteboard. Right? That's the most efficient. Working software is the primary measure of progress. So what's the measure of progress today in most projects? Plan, right? We look at the plan. If the plan says, so if these are our typical, where's my nice black marker here? So typical plans look something like this, right? Right, with nice milestones here. Yes? You guys seen these before? Okay. So if I'm here, right, and I'm done with this, and I'm halfway through this, and a quarter way through this, I'm on time. Woohoo! We're successful. And the reality is, you may not be providing any value at all at this point, right? And this is the measure of progress we have today. What these guys are saying is working software, which is valuable deliverables, basically, is the primary measure of progress. Because if you have a phase here called integration, okay, that one phase, you may go all the way up to it and you're 90% done, quote unquote, on paper. But when you start integrating, you're not done at all. You're not even 10% done at that point. So what this is saying is if you have 10 features that you're developing, If you do the analysis of all 10, you're 0% done still. If you do the coding of all 10, you're still 0% done. But if you finish one, right, done, you code it, you test it, it's ready for production, it's ready, then you're 10% done. Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. What?
Sorry, just a sheer joke. Peter's just adopted Agile, so he doesn't have to do a thing.
So let's take a look at this one. This one is quite interesting. This one actually, I would say, is one of the hardest principles to understand. Okay? Because it's not only talking about sustainable pace and preventing burnout for developers. It's actually deeper than that. And when you look at it, it says the sponsors as well. So what does the sponsors have to do with sustainable pace? Let me give you an example here. Do you guys have a train here? Metro train? Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. So let's say you're at the top of the escalator, right? And the train runs down here. And you look down and you see the train pulling up into the station. And you know that the train comes every 30 seconds. Are you going to rush down the escalator? Probably not. But if the train comes every minute, will you rush down? 2 minutes. 5 minutes. 25 minutes. 45 minutes. 6 months. Right? So, and when you rush down, right? If everyone rushes down, right, and tries to get onto that train, what happens? It's actually delayed. And when it's delayed multiple times, you start to lose trust in its actual cadence. So even though you think it may come every 2 minutes, you know over time that, it really doesn't come every 2 minutes. Which creates even more of that rush factor. Okay? Now, the same thing happened in organizations. The same exact thing. When you look at the total time from when the business sort of asks for something till when they get it, there's a time for that, right? Let's call it 6 months. Now, the question becomes, is 6 months a sustainable pace for the business to ask for stuff? If it's not, then it's going to create a rush effect. And if it creates a rush effect, it looks something like this, right? People, as soon as they hear a release is coming out, they start, hey, Brent, can you get this thing in the release, please? We really need this in the next release. You gotta add this for me, dude. I owe you one, right? And these favors start to be asked. Why? Because a release is coming, a train is coming. And everyone wants to get on that train. I grew up in Egypt, right? And a phenomena there is when the bus pulls up to the bus station, everyone just tries to jump on the bus. And it's because traffic is so bad there that people just don't know when the next bus is coming. They absolutely have no idea. So for all they know, this is the last bus today. I'm getting on it. And the same thing happened in organizations. Right? So we need to find that sweet spot for it to be sustainable. Because some of you said, I'll rush down there after a minute. Some of you said after 3. Some of you said after 10. Right? So what is the sweet spot for the organization to not rush things in? To know that there's always another bus coming. If we don't get it in this release, it will come into the next one. And that distance between one release and the other is sustainable from a business perspective. And that totally depends on the domain of the business. Because I've seen that time factor be a week in some businesses. And I've seen it be months in others. Continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. What do you guys think about that one? That is great. You guys are so interactive today.
That's what defines excellence is one of the issues that I have to deal with quite regularly, where I have somebody who says my job's not to get it done, it's to get it, it has to be technically excellent. And it's the definition or whose definition of excellence, well, it's certainly technical excellence in terms of standards and the like, but taking a week to polish a piece of software that adds no value in that polishing process. So,
I think that's a great point. And that really relates to the next one under it more than that, right? Simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential, right? Which is, don't just keep adding stuff because of your technical ego, right? That you just wanted, instead of creating a function, you create a whole framework, right? So, but this one really is continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. Because at the end of the day, if our software isn't designed well, then every time we add an iteration on it, we're going to have to rebuild the whole thing. Now, here's one thing I want you to remember about Agile. Agile will not solve all your problems, and it will expose them. So, if you're building things in thin slices, okay, and you have bad design, it's going to show up, and it's going to show up quickly. And unfortunately, what happens, and technical people understand this, bad designers compensate for bad design by over-designing, right? By over-engineering, by building in expansion points into the current design, in an effort to predict what current functionality will look like. And the reality is, you cannot predict what future functionality will look like. Therefore, again, number 10, build what's essential right now, and that's it. Because you actually increase code complexity by building in all these expansion points, and the reality is, you may never use them.
Can I just turn that round into a question to both you and Siva? I mean, I'm not a developer. Are there courses where developers who are trained in the arcane world of Java or .NET and C#, are they trained to write, maintainable, as in agile software, i.e. software that can either be reused or thrown out and rewritten cost effectively?
Yeah.
Is there interest? Are there courses and that sort of thing?
I'll show you the IC Agile Learning Roadmap in a second. There's a whole track on development and design, right? And the new term for it is clean code. That's what, because here's the thing. There's so much technology right now, right? To build clean code. I mean, and refactor the code. The realization is the first code you write is not going to be the best code, right? Just like you write an article. Your first draft isn't the best draft. So how can we refactor quickly? And there's so many tools right now around that refactoring, right? And going back to this notion of technical excellence, it's not about getting it right the first time. It's continuous attention to it and understanding what we call technical debt, right? Where technical debt means, listen, we got a release, so we're going to band-aid a solution right now, right? Because it's going to add customer value now. And we're going to put it on the books as debt. And we need to invest in removing our debt and paying off our debt, or else we're going to go bankrupt. And the debt incurs interest very, very quickly. And we've all seen this interest, right? Because, and I've seen it so many times where you have this piece of code no one wants to touch, right? And they just build wrapper upon wrapper upon wrapper around it, but no one wants to touch the thing because it just works. But the reality is there's so much debt we're incurring from this piece of code that at some point people call a code rewrite. It's bankruptcy. So there's a balance here between, and this is why I like the words continuous attention, right? You're not going to get it right the first time. But continuous attention to technical excellence and good design will enhance your agility. And then moving with that to the next one, which is simplicity. The art of maximizing the amount of work not done. So if you don't need it right now, don't do it. There's a term for that called yagni. You ain't gonna need it. Right? And this is a problem because as we're building stuff, we keep thinking about the future. But what if the client wants this? What if the client wants this? This is a developer's mind, right? As they're working, they're looking and say, that's it? No. You know what? They're going to need this in the future. Stop, dude. You don't know. They don't even know. And so they're building all these additional code complexities just because an imagination in their head, unless they can really predict the future, that's a whole different discussion, right? But an imagination in their head that the customer is going to need this. The reality is, icky-wissy. The customer doesn't even know what they want right now. And I always say, 0 lines of code means 0 bugs. Every additional line of code you write is a potential bug. Right? The best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. Right? So we talked about this when we talked about drive and motivation. Right? We talked about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And this is really autonomy on a team level. Now, there's a difference between self-organizing and self-managing. So let's define what self-organizing means. Self-organizing says this. I, as the business, say to you as a team, listen guys, we need to build this. Now, traditionally, I used to say, all right, we need to build this and you do this, and you do this. The self-organizing team says, we need to build this and team, you guys figure out, you organize yourselves around the work. And I'm going to hold you as a team accountable to the work. And what the principle is saying is that the best work you can get is from self-organizing teams. Right? Because of the level of engagement the team will have. Now, people think, whoa, wait a minute here. So you're telling me a tester may do the architecture? Right? That's taking it to an extreme. Because as the team self-organizes, no one's going to make a fool out of themselves, right? And the tester isn't going to volunteer to do the architecture, right? The architect's probably going to do that. So one of the key things in self-organizing teams is to make sure that they're cross-functional, that you have the people you need to actually get the work done. But when you leave the task up to the team and let them self-organize around the work, there's a much greater degree of buy-in that you get from the team. And this is the interesting part for me, is that team members may engage in things that you never knew that they were good at. Right? And this is what I commonly see with the team. The other additional benefit you get is team development. Right? So the team now, instead of really siloing the work, and instead of saying, listen, you take this, and you take this, well, as soon as Brent finishes that, he's going to say, I'm done. Right? But if I give it to the team has to say, I'm done when the work is done. Does that make sense? You have a question.
And always, how do you handle the situation where you've got a strong personality who thinks that they're pretty crash on at this, and an introvert, quiet personality? So,
many times. So the introvert versus extrovert discussion, right? And this is, I think, where we go back to give them the environment and support they need, right? So strong teams also have facilitators, right? And we're going to talk about that tomorrow. So a good facilitator will ensure participation from everyone and will ensure that one person or voice is not dominating. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. But also there's as teams self-organize around the work, other members start to put other members in place, right? and if someone's dominating the discussion, because the team starts to own the output as a whole. And this is where, if you can get the team to get rewarded as a team, the dynamics shift tremendously. Because it's not about, because even if I sort of overburden myself and ignore the other, well, everyone gets screwed if I don't finish the work. So now I have an interest in getting everyone actually up to par. The last one, at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective and then tunes and adjusts its behavior. Not practices, it's behaviors accordingly. Right? So this is a point of the inspect and adapt, right? The empirical process. That the team as a whole stops and says, wait, let's not talk about work for a second. Let's talk about how we are doing as the human machine kind of thing, right? I mean, if we're really talking about the knowledge age of work, just like we stop the factory line and look at the well-being of the conveyor belts, I'm not talking about the product it's building, I'm just looking about the machine itself. I want to look about my human machine, the team. And I want to see, how are we doing team dynamics-wise? How are our behaviors? Are we open? Are we transparent? Are we collaborative? Right? And then adjusts its behaviors accordingly. This is to make sure that the well-oiled machine, which is the human machine, can continue to function.